Welcome to Writer's Syndrome, a podcast about writing from start to finish. This episode's topic, we're carrying on with our Story Beats Act 2 deep dive. I'm Russ and joining me as always is Tim Letney. Tim, let's break into two, right? Are we breaking into two?
We're breaking into two. I'm ready to break.
This is a beefy Act 2.
Yeah, we got to get right to it, man.
Yeah, we got to get into it because this is like the meat of it, and this is where everyone has like their biggest problems. How did you do with your second act? I know your acts were kind of like all over the place, but you were so worried. You're like, my first act is like the first and second act combined, I think.
Yeah, it was based on how I had organized my chapters. It's much better now. It's Good. Actually like the middle. It's fun.
Gamey.
I have some pretty abrupt transitions into it. I will say my break into act 2 is maybe too literal. But how about you? How was your break into act 2 and your act 2?
My act 2 was not too shabby after a couple drafts. Definitely things were they weren't exactly lined up. So again, we're still going with like the Save the Cat story beats here. I did okay with it. It's definitely it's a trudge for act 2 to get all these pieces and keep it fun and keep people engaged. Because like, yeah, first act, that's fine. Third act, sure. But then second act is where you can lose people, right? Where it might have strong.
Second act, I've definitely got like, that's when my questing begins.
Yeah.
You know, it's when my mains start providing the wrong answers and they start doing the wrong things.
Yeah.
But my whole thing is like, I wanted it to be fun and engaging. And I always love the act 2 of books and movies. It's my favorite act. Well, I like act 1. I will say tonally, initially, I had done a pretty big tone shift for act 2. Mm-hmm. Whereas like, my book had initially started with bombast and then kind of got a little more suspenseful and dreadful. Mm-hmm. That changed a little bit when I had to restructure. So now there's still some bombast in my act 2, and then it kind of leans into like some more quiet, suspenseful moments.
Yeah, mine act 2 is everyone's just on the run, I think.
Yeah.
Pretty much, and like kind of bouncing around, just trying to put them through the ringer as much as I could. So
when your characters are starting act 2, right? That's the beat we're going to talk about. That's the 6th beat if you're coming to us from last time. So they're done with the debate. They've heard their call to action, and initially they're reluctant to change, and now this is when the hero is deciding to accept that call to action. So they're stepping into that world willfully, or who knows, being dragged into it. Yep. And they're operating in this new, changed post-catalyst world. And it's a very different world from which they operated in the first act.
Yep. And it's like this, it's kind of a decisive action beat where it's separating act 1 and act 2. And this, I think break into, again, just a guide, but it says about 20% into the novel. So, and it's kind of wild to think there's 7 sections in act 2. Again, this is Save the Cat. So there's other ones that kind of have different number of sections, but they all kind of cover the same thing. This goes from like 20% to 80% of the novel, just to give you an idea of like how,
my goodness,
how weighty.
Yeah.
It's funny when you start using this and breaking down movies and everything, you see like, oh yeah, okay, this is the meatiest part. So, but yeah, that's the break into 2. It is the moment, the decision making. We are leaving the world we know, and we're flipping over into act 2, the new world that the hero needs to go through. So,
but since the character still isn't that kind of best version of themselves, though they're in this new world, they're still not making the correct decisions. Like the solutions they're going for aren't necessarily the proper solutions for
themselves or whatever goals
for themselves,
they have, right?
Or the world or whatever else.
You kind of roll into just shortly after break into 2. This is where you get introduced to like the B story. You get an intro of like a single character or multiple characters, right? Who will end up like serve to help the hero kind of learn the theme, right? That which we did like back in act 1, like theme stated. Could be a love interest, could be a friend, could be a family member, could be a nemesis, could be a mentor. I guess it'd be like equivalent to like Obi-Wan to Luke. Yeah,
we talked about it last time, right? Interestingly, that, like for Star Wars, the introduction of Obi-Wan happens before break into act 2. So like a B character is introduced, but they just happen in close proximity to one another.
I also wonder, like B story would break in act 2 for Star Wars, would it be Han Solo as well? Would that be right about? I forget the exact point that when he's introduced, but he would also be probably a B story character. He definitely is a B story character, right?
Yeah, he definitely is.
And he's definitely a friend, or I guess at first, kind of just out for himself, but becomes a friend later on because he's got his own arc. Or I think Obi-Wan's kind of just, I'm just here as a mentor.
And one thing that should be noted too about break into act 2 is that there's usually a goal, right? Like a new goal is introduced there. something for the character to strive for. It just may not be the right goal.
Yeah, right. Because it can shift and change as they're going through, and as the choices they're making and obstacles they're throwing in their way. The thing that they have still yet to learn, the choices they're going to make are going to cause that goal to either be the right thing or wrong thing. So, and you get into like one of the beefy parts just before the midpoint, the fun and games, right?
Yeah.
So this ranges from like 20 to 50% of the novel. And this is where you really see the hero and this new world, and seeing how they're like reacting to this new world, seeing how their decisions are either succeeding or failing. They're either loving or hating it. I think this also like the section like really represents like what's the hook of the story, like why'd the reader pick up the book, right? This is like the globetrotting adventure. This is we're on the run from such and such type of stuff that's going on.
Funny, this is right where I am now, right? I'm like in probably the middle of fun and games on my 6th edit. And making very sure to make sure it's fun. Like if this part is dragging, if this part is not fun to read, or maybe isn't fun to write, you got to look at it pretty hard, because this is the meat and potatoes of the book. Yeah,
I think I read a book recently. I'm not going to call it out because I still kind of enjoyed it, but this might be the section where I was like, this is a slog to get through. Like, but yeah, that's pretty much for fun and games. But it is.
I'll talk about Perfume. I think in their fun and game section, the main character goes into a cavern and just sleeps for a year. I'm like, that's not fun.
That's taking a long nap is nice, but I don't know if it's fun necessarily. Oh my god! I guess we're gonna stick with the Harry Potter breakdown too. That's pretty helpful, right? That's like where he's enjoying his life at Hogwarts. Where he takes the magical classes. He's learning to fly. He's recruited to play Quidditch. Stuff like that. So all those events in like the new world, they're kind of exploring. So, and then we hit the midpoint, 50%. The literal middle of the novel.
Yep.
And this is kind of a key one. And this, I struggled with this in my own story. And this is where the fun and games pretty much either culminates in like a false victory or a false defeat for your hero, right?
Yeah.
And it took me a while to get this correct. Actually, I think technically my midpoint falls a little later than this, but yeah. And this is where pretty much something important should happen here, right? To your hero that kind of pushes them towards like the real change, where they start realizing their flaw or the thing that they need to change to actually solve their real problem towards the end of the book, right? So you're getting to that point where the reader's kind of like, okay, this is a huge moment for them. Are they going to make the right decision to change? Because you've been following along with them. You've been watching them make all the wrong decisions and running into all these obstacles. Are they going to actually make the right decision to change what their flaw is, right?
Right. I'm thinking about it through mine and my midpoint, which makes sense. I've got, multiple character perspectives, but really kind of two mains, because I've got two separate quests. And I think both end, because I think it's right, it's supposed to end in a false victory or a false defeat. Mm-hmm. They're either succeeding or they're floundering. And I think for mine, it's a false victory leading to it. But the other important part of this beat, right, is that it's not just a moment of like, it's not like break into two necessarily. There's something that's supposed to heighten, maybe not tension, but raise the stakes. Like the world gets once again either more intense or a little bigger in a way that forces the main character or your supporting characters towards the actual change they need to make. So they're still on this journey. They're still being pushed forward through this kind of meat grinder. It's not catching a breath. It's still propelling characters forward to maybe the people that they will be eventually, but aren't quite ready to be yet.
Taking a break at the midpoint. When you put your beats together, and I know you kind of retrofit them like I did you do separate for main characters? Did you run each character through their own set of beats, or did you just have a single beat sheet?
No, it was unified. But I mean, like they kind of mirror each other. It's certainly similar tone. And it's interesting, right? This is one of the beats, kind of like B story and fun and games that even though I hadn't planned as much as I would have liked to in retrospect, it was already there.
Yeah.
Like I think just through, listening to stories and reading books and whatnot, like this one's kind of ingrained in me. So luckily I didn't really need to retrofit this one too much. Not like All Is Lost, where I had an All Is Lost, and we'll get there eventually, but I needed to really improve it. How about you?
I ended up doing beats for all my characters, not all of them, for my main character and for Lilo, just because she was so integral to the story later on. So I didn't do it for Blackwell because he didn't have enough. I don't think he's definitely more of a supporting character, where Lilo ended up becoming kind of like a secondary main character there. So So yeah, I did it for both her and Elliot. The book I'm working on now, I'm doing the same thing. I've got two main characters, and I'm running through the beats in parallel for both of them because like their worlds are end up colliding again at some point. So
yeah, it's interesting. I think accidentally I used my main character as well. I think this could probably be said of all fiction, but it wasn't planned for me. I used my main character as a catalyst for change for the other characters. So like their decisions are kind of in reaction to hers, and their new lives are in reaction to her life. So there's kind of a mirroring component to their arcs, and they all have them. They're not the focal point, but they're there. Like 3 of my characters go through like substantive change.
So then after the midpoint, we run into the bad guys close in. Another big chunk, 50 to 75% of the book. So it's kind of like a reactionary to the midpoint, right? So if the midpoint is like a false victory, then this is like kind of the kickoff of like the downward path where things are just going to get worse. So if like, hey, we're on top, it's like, no, we got to put them through the ringer even more at this point, right? And if it's in the opposite, if it's a false defeat at the midpoint, then this section is kind of an upward path where things seem to get better. Either way, it's like the hero's deep-rooted flaws, like internal or actual like bad guys. Like bad guys close in, by the way, it's like it could be an internal thing. It doesn't have to be actual bad guys with sunglasses and guns, but they actually are like start closing in on them and kind of putting that pressure on your hero.
I feel like really good about this beat now, but I did not. Like this was one of the ones that I really needed to kind of hone and refine through subsequent edits. It was a tough one for me, but it's crazy important.
So then after that, we get the All Is Lost, which is about 75% of the way through the novel. And this is supposed to be like the lowest point for your hero, right?
Yep.
I mean, all is lost, right? It's like literally all is lost. And this is the beat where it's typically an action beat where something happens to the hero combined with like the internal bad guys or whatever that bad guy situation is, like pushes them to like absolute rock bottom.
Just to take one quick step back so I can go forward.
Sure.
Like with bad guys close in, right? If your midpoint was one thing, so if your midpoint was like a victory, then this would be a defeat. And if your midpoint was a defeat, then this would be a victory. So my personal midpoint is a victory of sorts. So my bad guys close in as a defeat. And I had treated my bad guys close in as an all's lost. And they were kind of smushed together.
Yep.
And then organically, my all's lost got worse. Like not worse. I mean, like it actually got better because of how bad it became. Like I was able to take my character low and kind of really torture them in a way they can come back from, but torture them. So, and that happened. That wasn't like, oh my God, I didn't do All's Lost right. It was, I ended up going like, I had planned to go right and then I went left. Like, cause I like had the beats, I had my outline. I was like, all right, today I'm writing this part. And I was like, oh, I could really, really hurt the character here. And I was like, well, that's kind of the point, right?
That's it.
That's the absolute point. You want to bring them to their absolute lowest. Like I'll tell you, when I wrote mine, when I got to it and I landed, I was like, I felt super confident about it. I was excited. I was excited by how bad my character felt. I put on Elliott Smith. This was like really somber, sad music. I was like, oh man, it's Dark Night of the Soul. Let's put on some morose, sad guitar music and just weep in our beds.
So I think mine, I don't want to give spoilers away here, but mine was definitely when Elliot returns back to Boston and he finds a note from a key character. And I did what you had said. Like my All Is Lost for Elliot, my main character, was mashed in. It's very quickly mashed in with like Dark Night of the Soul and Fun and Games, like right towards the end of it. I do have like a specific chapter though that is a beat and a break for it, and it's his moment. It's kind of like the All Is Lost and the Dark Night of the Soul in like 2 quick scenes. So it's not drawn out too much, but it's a moment where he gets a note from basically his mentor character. You know, he then moves directly into Dark Night of the Soul. Now Lilo's All Is Lost comes a little bit later. They haven't lined up yet.
So if we're like looking at tentpole stories, right, for Star Wars, this is when Obi-Wan dies. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, that's probably about it, right? Where he's sulking in the Millennium Falcon afterwards, and we're like, oh man.
Yeah, oh man.
Oh man, you got the blanket on him. He's like, this sucks.
So where is it in the first Potter book?
So the all is lost in there is when Harry and the team there find out that Voldemort there is about to get his hands on the Sorcerer's Stone, which is being kept in the Hogwarts castle. That's all is lost.
That doesn't sound very good.
No.
It doesn't seem like everything's lost.
I haven't watched that movie in a long time, so I don't know if like what they were going through up to that point. Or, like were they kind of defeated, and then like now they're finding out like, oh, all the things have closed in, and then Voldemort's coming in to take the thing that they,
I remember like as a kid, right, like watching action movies, and I always, since they're like often, especially in the 80s and 90s, they're like male power fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
So I always hated the all is lost, because it's usually when the character is beaten to a pulp, or one of their friends dies or something, and like they're no longer like extraordinary. They're like limping and wounded, or they're sad, and it's like, I didn't come here to see a sad person. But it's an important beat, because you got to bring them low, and that's kind of what we're getting to with the next beat. With are we done with All is Lost?
Yeah, All is Lost.
And we're getting to like Dark Knight, which I think All is Lost and Dark Knight of the Soul are so interrelated. They're like, they can happen in such close proximity.
Yeah.
And I laugh. I pointed out to my kids, because how often in movies and TV shows does Dark Knight of the Soul have rain, have the skies opening up, and it just starts pouring? Like, it's such a cue, and it's effective. And I mean, guiltily, I do it too.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's like, I'm like, hey guys, it's raining. They're like, oh, is this when the? I'm like, yep, that's the beat. That's when they're in their absolute lowest.
Yeah. So this is like around 75 to 80% of the novel. This is like the last beat of Act 2, and this is a reaction beat to All's Lost. That's why I think like they can be pretty tight, and like kind of right after. Like All's Lost is a pretty quick point, and then Dark Knight of the Soul is like a reaction to that. And this is where the hero's like taking time to process like everything that's happened so far, and probably almost giving like a recap of how they're feeling, and heroes should definitely be worse off than they were at the start of the novel, right? This is kind of dragging them down just to build them back up to get into Act 3, where hopefully they succeed or not.
In the genre books and movies, it's so easy to see this beat.
Oh God, yes.
It's yeah. I'd say literary fiction maybe a little less so, because I think the All is Lost and the Dark Knight is often like an internal thing. It's not always outside forces that are kind of bearing down.
Yeah.
Whereas genre is kind of like the villain hurt the hero.
Yes.
So bad.
Yes.
They're sad about it.
Yes. They're like, man, I can't go on. What do I do?
What do I do now?
So then, he should be the hero should be the worse off than at the start of the novel. It's that darkest hour before the dawn type of thing, right? But it's
sometimes like, literally.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's literally night and dawn is coming.
and raining.
And rain is coming.
But it's like it's a moment right before the hero starts figuring out like the solution to their big problem, which will get you into like Act 3, and where they start learning their life lesson, and the theme state. It all kind of comes back to that.
Yeah, those beats, man, like All is Lost, Dark Knight, and then break into 3. They're so connected. It could almost be one beat. I mean, they're equally important, and you need to kind of hit the nuance of each of them.
Yeah,
but they're so connected. They can happen in like 5 minutes.
Yep. Like
the whole thing could happen very quickly.
I think a lot of other story structures, I think they do have them condensed into like one. A lot of them do have them condensed like one beat. It
makes sense.
It's usually just going in Act 3 or end of Act 2 and Act 3. But that's why I like this, because like they kind of separate out a little bit more of like here's like some nuance to getting your hero through this point, and like the things that they should be feeling. So,
and it's good that it's separated, because these beats are just so visible.
Yeah,
these are the ones where you're like,
yeah.
Like once you see them, you can't unsee them. And for better and worse, it's like you start to see like the code of the Matrix. These are the ones that always stand out. Like, you're watching fiction, you're reading fiction.
Oh yeah.
I kind of wish I could go back to a time and not know.
Going through this and like starting to pick these out, and like the stories I'm reading and movies I'm watching, I thought it would totally ruin my enjoyment of some of these things. But honestly, sometimes I'll like shut it off, and I'll just be like, let me watch it once just to watch it and be entertained, and not really pay attention, think about much. I don't even think about all the steps and payoffs. Just be entertained by the whole thing. But there's the very clear ones where I'm like, oh yeah, all is lost. Yep. Like,
yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what it has done. It's certainly increased my enjoyment and appreciation for well-written books and screenplays.
Yes.
Because when I don't see it coming,
yes,
or when it does surprise me, even though I see the beats, I don't quite know what direction the story is going to go. That's when I'm like, all right, you followed it and it's great. And you surprised me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And knowing that you're on this roller coaster, basically going through these beats, and like they pull you at the right moments at all, like the right emotional pulls, and like, oh, this guy, it's the worst thing ever that's happened to him. And then him, the characters, the hero, whoever, coming through at the end. Once you feel that kind of that pull on you, you're like, oh, that's a really well tight written story. So that's it. That's all of Act 2. That's all 7 beats in Act 2 via Save the Cat, but it's very much structurally the same as a lot of the other ones that are out there.
I can't believe we got through this so quickly. This is such a meaty act.
I know. But I felt like
I guess it's not a very complicated act.
It's complicated, and once you get into some of these sections, I would say like the fun and games and the bad guys close in. That's a lot of work. Like when you actually get into the work of those sections and like doing that, it's like sure you can say like, hey, this is where they see the new world. They're either loving or hating it, and it's like cool. Now what like. You've got to come up with those scenes and all those actions and those beats and those moments within there to like, okay, make this the meat of the story and make it interesting. The same thing with Bad Guys Close In, making sure you hit that just right, where all the other things that trickle down from there and then going into Act 3 just feel right.
But I mean, it being the center of the book, I would suspect that most people are thinking about this piece early on. Mm-hmm. So Act 1 is so much world building and character building and setting the stage for what's going to happen in Act 2 and like the enjoyment aspect of it. I won't say it's easy to write, but I should say I can say it should be fun to write. Like the majority of this act should be fun to write.
Yeah.
And maybe like you got to refine bad guys and you're all's lost.
Yeah.
But that's really at the tail end of Act 2. It's a very important part of Act 2. But it's a small piece of Act 2. It's like you're 10 or 20% of Act 2, right? It's small.
Yeah.
Everything else is just like the pitch. It's like the book cover. It's the back of the movie. It's hopefully why you wrote it and why people want to pick it up.
I don't know. Is there anything else? Anything else to tap on there, or just?
I think we're good. Let's save Act 3 for next time.
What have you been reading, watching?
What did I open up and start reading? I don't remember.
That good, huh?
I've got a stack of books. I've got a stack of unfinished books on my nightstand. That's what I'll say. Here are all the things I'm reading and not finishing. That second N.K. Jemisin book from Broken Earth.
Okay.
White Noise by Don DeLillo.
Oof.
What else do I have? The Deep by Nick Cutter.
Wow.
There, I think I've got something else. There's something on there. Oh, I've got Children of Huron by J.R.R. Tolkien there. But the only thing I'm actually reading every day is I'm reading, as I said last time, The Two Towers to my kids. Nice. Before bed.
Nice.
Which is phenomenal and way better than I like Fellowship more, but I think Two Towers is written much better. It's much easier to read.
You been watching anything?
I've been watching Foundation.
I just finished season 2.
So I am maybe 1 or 2 episodes away from the end of season 2.
Okay.
I enjoy it. Some of the writing is atrocious. I like all the new Empire stuff, right? None of that existed in the book.
They're going very off. Like, there's definitely some major, no pun intended, beats that they're from the books they're hitting. Did you read all the Foundation books, or just? I
only read the 3.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw.
I didn't do when he didn't he get bribed into doing sequels sometime in the 80s?
Yeah, he did 3 more or maybe 6. I don't know how many more there are in the 80s or whatever. And I think I've mentioned this before. I'm curious to read them because I want to see if they pulled. I know they pulled something in from.
I heard the 4th one was supposed to be good.
Okay, because I know they. So whatever, the novel's been out for forever, so this isn't a spoiler. But I guess in those later books, he tied his Robots and Murder, the Caves of Steel, whatever series, made them kind of in the same universe.
I love those Caves of Steel books.
Those are I have it sitting on my coffee table, staring at me because I want to crack and reopen.
I can't believe they haven't adapted those into movies or a show. They're so adaptable.
So good. So I guess I think they pulled some of the because I don't want to spoil season 2 here for you, but they pulled some themes of that into this show. So
with
Demerzel.
What's her name?
Yeah,
Demerzel.
That's it.
Yeah, that stuff was cool. It's I don't love that one of the really cool. I know you can't adapt it, in this way, but I'll say one of the really cool things about the first three Foundation books is that it deals with deep time and the ramifications of people's actions. But those people die and time goes on and those people are forgotten. And this one, they keep coming up with ways to keep characters alive for 300 years. And I know they're doing it so the audience has an anchor and they're giving these characters arcs.
Yeah.
But I don't love it. I don't love it.
Yeah, I feel like I need to reread the books. So I might actually just I might just crank through all of them because I'm just curious.
I'll tell you, if I read them, this will be the third time I've read them.
I think I've read them.
That's how old I'm getting.
I think I've read them twice as well. Like at least I haven't read the later ones. I read the original trilogy at least twice. So, I mean, they're not crazy heavy reads. So,
am I going to have to stack another book on my nightstand? It's right behind me.
No, just pick one and finish it, and pick another one and finish it. That's it.
All right, Two Towers.
But I did finish season 2. Honestly, I've really enjoyed season 2. I've enjoyed the tangents. I've enjoyed the new things they've added to it. I've enjoyed the new things I've liked.
I mean, it looks like $1 million.
Yeah, it looks great.
I mean, it certainly kept me watching on like a lot of like mediocre shows. So I don't want to poo-poo it too bad. It's just sometimes there's some like plot trickery going on that I'm like, what is happening? Like, it feels like sometimes like what I'm guilty of is like they're writing to a tent pole. They're writing to a situation. And how the characters are acting either don't make sense or seemingly are retconned like 2 episodes later.
Like, I could see that. Yeah.
Like Gail's character is the most unsatisfying character. She's like the main character for 2 seasons, and I'm like, I much prefer Salvor, but Gail is just like annoying.
I can't. I'm not going to get into anymore.
Okay, maybe I should sit it out.
Yeah, just sit it out because
wait. I'll withhold my judgment. Yeah. I'll say for 2.5 seasons that character has not been enjoyable.
Yeah, I've been fine with that character. I have other things that
She's just always yelling.
Yeah, I'm fine with
complaining. It's like having me in a movie.
It's like having you on a podcast right now. I kid.
No wonder why you like it.
Yeah,
you're like
right.
me.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. No, I don't want to. I'm curious to hear what you think about once it's wrapped up, though, because I'm not gonna. That's it. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop talking. So we'll talk. You're gonna send me a text, I think, when it ends. So I can't wait.
What about the other thing I'm watching is the Ahsoka. You watching Ahsoka?
I haven't started, but I'm going to start that next. I'll probably start it this weekend.
I'm loving it. It actually got me playing that Jedi Survivor game. I think it's
nice.
I mean, I don't want to like hype it up too much for you, but it's certainly worth your time.
I honestly, watching the first trailer, I like Ahsoka as a character.
Although, did you watch? You didn't watch the cartoons, did you?
I didn't watch Rebels. That's the only one I didn't watch.
Yeah, it's kind of Rebels. I mean, it's like let me take that back. It's Rebels.
Yeah.
So like, you'll get more out of it if you watch it. If you end up watching Rebels, but watch quick because I'm canceling Disney Plus. How about you? What are you reading? What are you watching?
Well, like I said, I just Foundation season 2. I've just been cranking on that. Just finished it last night. And then reading wise, I just finished. Got a couple books I'm working on right now. The Hunter by Richard Stark. It's like an old gangster revenge story, kind of classic. I think they made a movie out of it with Jason Statham called Parker or something. It's a very straightforward like crime revenge story. So yeah, I read that. It's a short read, but it was fine. Definitely written a different time. And then I started about a third of the way through. I started The World We Make, which is book 2 of N.K. Jemisin's Great Cities. I think it's only gonna be 2 books. Cool. I don't know if it's gonna be a trilogy or not, but I started that book like 2 days ago, and I'm like just cranking through chapters. It moves. I really enjoyed The City We Become, the first book. So working on that. And then I have queued up, because I've never read it, The Gunslinger, Stephen King's.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I thought I'd give that a shot and give it a whirl. So
was that the first Dark Tower one?
Yeah.
I'll say I started reading that one because I wanted to kind of get into like a big fantastical world.
Yeah.
And it's interesting since I think it's the very first book he wrote. Granted, I think it's the second or third book he published after Carrie. It's funny how sparse it is. It's like intentionally sparse, but it's cool. Like I love like the King is so influenced by 1, Lord of the Rings, and 2, just seeing spaghetti westerns on the big screen.
Yeah.
Like his like cinematic experience, of like, who's the guy that did like Good, Bad, and the Ugly?
Sergio Leone.
Yeah, Leone. Like just his exposure to those movies and like the old movies.
I was so surprised. I was like, oh man, Stephen King book. I was like, yeah, I want to give it a shot. I want to read it. I was like, this thing's probably like 3,000 pages. Like, oh, it's only like 280 or 300 pages, something like that. So I was like, oh, okay. But I guess the next few books, it starts cranking up. It's like 500, 600 pages. I'm like, I write with all your words.
Easy with your words. I just like where people find their inspiration, right? Because it's not always where you think. If it's King, if it was with like those books and movies, even N.K. Jemisin, I read like a little blurb about how she went to some kind of NASA conference. Like they'd kind of brought writers together to talk about the real science of like space exploration, and because they wanted to make sure that upcoming authors are actually using science as opposed to just making things up and kind of giving them a grounding.
Yep.
And even though there's not a one-to-one correlation of what they had kind of taught in that seminar, it's what gave her the inspiration for the Broken Earth trilogy.
Oh, no shit. That's cool.
Which is really cool. Like it's not sci-fi necessarily. It's kind of more fantasy. But it sparked her imagination and it got her going. And then she ended up writing, those really awesome books. So really cool.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's our episode. So that's Story Beats Act 2. Next episode, we're going to get into Story Beats Act 3 and wrap it up. I think if you enjoyed the episode, share with someone you know. Instagram, Writer Syndrome Books, the website formerly known as Twitter, Writer_Syndrome. I love it every time we do this. We're like, ugh.
Yeah, I hope he starts charging so we can just delete it.
But yeah, you can find all our episodes and contact information if you want to reach out on writersyndrome.com. And yeah, next episode, Story Beats Act 3.
I love it.